Hello students, in this introductory lecture, we'll discuss class 10 biology chapter 6. The name of the chapter is the life process. Student, in this lecture, we will discuss one of the important topic, that's nutrition in human being. What is nutrition, student? The process of taking up nutrients, food, and utilizing them to fulfill the requirement of the body is called a nutrition. Student, nutrition is the process of taking food and obtaining energy from the food. Students, our body needs energy to stay alive and to perform number of other activities. Now to get that energy, we need food. We obtain the food, and before we obtain the energy from the obtained food or the derived food, the food should be broken down. The food should be made soluble into the blood so that the food can be taken to different cells of the body. Once the food enters inside the cell, then only the process of releasing energy begins. So, but before that process, the food should be broken down. And for that food to be broken down, our body have a system called a digestive system. So we will discuss about the same. That's the digestive system. Student, here is a block diagram to make you understand this digestive systems. Student, we all know about the digestive system. What are the organs involved in the digestive systems? So we have a mouth in the digestive system. We have esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and finally anus. Now student, this entire structure is called an alimentary canal. Now alimentary canal is a long tube of a different shape extending from our mouth to the anus. It's a continuous tube of a varying shape extending from our mouth to the anus. That is called alimentary canals. Now different part of this alimentary canals have a different shape and a different name. The beginning of the alimentary canal is called a mouth. Then next comes a thin tube, that's the esophagus. Then after that, a swollen structure called a stomach. Then small intestine, that's the longest part of the alimentary canal. And we have then a bigger pipe, which is called a large intestine. And finally, we have the end of the end of this alimentary canal, which is called the anus. Now, student, let's discuss what happens to the food that we take. So, we consume the food and our digestion process, the breakdown of the food starts right from our mouth. Student, inside our mouth, there is a salivary glands. We all know about the salivary glands. That's a gland that secretes the saliva. Student, that saliva contains a kind of enzymes called salivary amylase. Enzymes. Salivary amylase. Now student, what is this enzymes? Enzymes are the chemical substances that helps in biochemical reactions. Biochemical reactions means the number of reactions which is going on inside our body. That's the biochemical reactions. Now to make that biochemical reactions faster, there are chemical substances helping or accelerating those biochemical reactions. Those chemical substances are called enzymes. So we have an enzyme called salivary amylase in our saliva. So the moment we take the food inside our mouth, our salivary glands starts secreting that salivary amylase, and the salivary amylase starts acting on a component of a food called starch. So this is the place where the digestion begins. In this our mouth, this partial digestion of starch takes place. Partial digestion of a starch takes place, and now this partially digested food is swallowed and is pushed towards the stomach. This partially digested food is pushed towards the stomach by the contraction and relaxation, the rhythmic contractions and relaxation of this tube, which is called the esophagus. This contractions and relaxation, the rhythmic contractions and relaxations of the muscles of this esophagus make the food move towards the stomach. This rhythmic contractions and relaxation of the esophagus is called a peristaltic movement. So student, this peristaltic movement of our esophagus makes the partially digested food move towards the stomach. So this is what peristaltic movement, rhythmic contractions and relaxations of the muscles of the esophagus that push the food downward. So downward means towards the stomach. Now student, next part, the food comes into the stomach and food spent most of its time inside our stomach. Now student, stomach wall contains another type of a glands called a gastric glands. Now gastric glands secretes gastric juice. That's the secretion secreted by our gastric glands, which is present in the intestinal, this stomach wall. Now this gastric juice consists of HCl, pepsin and mucus. This is the component of a gastric juice. Now gastric juice has a three different component: HCl, pepsin and mucus. Student, HCl is a hydrochloric acid. It's a corrosive acid uh, which helps in the digestion process. Pepsin, it's an enzymes. And mucus, it's a sleepy, slimy fluid part that makes the gastric juice. Now student, pepsin is the enzyme that helps in protein digestions. But student, protein digestion, for the protein digestion, this pepsin needs acidic medium. Now this HCl makes the medium acidic in our stomach, or we can say this HCl prepares the medium for the pepsin enzymes to act. If there is no acidic medium, this pepsin enzymes for its action, it will be difficult for the pepsin to act on the protein. So HCl makes the acidic medium for the pepsin, and we all know this HCl being corrosive, it may cause harm to our tender lining of the this stomach wall. So now to protect the harmful effect of this HCl, we have another component of the gastric juice, that's a mucus. Now that mucus makes a layer, it develops a coating around the wall of the intestine and prevents the corrosion, the erosion of the tender lining or the cells of the stomach wall. So that's the function of this HCl, pepsin and mucus. So this gastric juice, the component pepsin of the gastric juice helps in the protein digestion, students, and that takes place in this stomach. Now student, we have a stomach. There is another component, there is another part in this stomach, that is what the sphincter muscles. Sphincter muscles is a muscle that regulates the flow of the food, the digested food, the partially digested food into the next part of our next part of the alimentary canal, that's the small intestine. So the regulation, the partially digested food is sent to the small intestine by this sphincter muscles. Now student, next comes small intestine, the longest part of the alimentary canal. So our food spent most of its time in this alimentary canal, or we can say this is the part of our body, this is the part of the digestive system where this digestion process completes. Now student, this small intestine also consists of the villi. Now villi are what? Villi are the finger-like projections which is present on the inner surface of the intestinal wall. Now the presence of this villi makes the rapid absorption of the food. The digested food is absorbed very fast. That's possible because of the presence of this finger-like projections all around the inner surface of the intestine, that's villi. Now student, next comes the large intestine. So most of the food is digested here and the undigested food is sent to the large intestine. Now in this large intestine, from the undigested food, if the water is present, that water is absorbed and the undigested food is eliminated through the anal sphincter. Student, we discussed about the sphincter muscles which is present in the stomach also, that regulates the flow of the digested food into the small intestine. We have another kind of sphincter muscle that is present in anal sphincter. Now this anal sphincter also controls the elimination of the undigested food through the anus. That's the anus. So through this anus, what happens? The periodic elimination of a feces takes place. So student, that's all about the human digestive system, or we can say the nutrition in human being. Students, now let's move on and discuss one more important topic of this chapter, that's the respiration. Just a while ago, student, we discussed about the nutrition process. That was the process where we obtained the food and derived energy. In the nutrition process, we obtained the food and the food was broken down. The food was made suitable for the energy production. Now this respiration is one such process where that suitable food, the food which was made suitable in the process of digestion, that food is broken down and energy is produced. So this respiration, in short, is a process where energy is produced from the digested food. So it's a biochemical process in which the breakdown of organic compound takes place in oxidation process with the release of energy inside the cell. Now student, biochemical process. What is biochemical process? Those process which takes place inside the living body, that's what the chemical process, the chemical reaction which takes place inside the living body is called a biochemical process. Organic molecules like the food are the organic molecules. So those food organic molecules like glucose, or we can say proteins, fats, all these are the organic compounds. These are broken down by the process oxidation process. Now you know what is oxidation process. Oxidation is the addition of oxygen. In our chemistry classes we discussed oxidation process is the addition of oxygen, or we can say breakdown of something in presence of oxygen. And in this process, in this respiration process, what happens? Energy is released, and this respiration process takes place inside the cell. Now it's a biochemical process, the chemical reaction taking place inside the body. In this process, organic compounds are broken down by the process called oxidation process, and in this process energy is released, and this process takes place inside a cell. That's what the respiration. Now student, what happens to the food, the energy giving food inside the cell? Let's see. So glucose is a 6 carbon molecule, C6H12O6. Okay students, glucose, now it's a 6 carbon molecule, C6H12O6. Now this is present inside our cell. Now it's ready to be produced energy. Now this glucose, which is a 6 carbon molecule, in cytoplasm it is broken down to pyruvate, 3 carbon molecule. And this process, that is the breakdown of a glucose into pyruvate molecule, that is 6 carbon molecule to 3 carbon molecule, takes place in different type of cells, in every type of cells. And now this 3 carbon molecules is broken down to produce energy 3 different ways. You can see here, this 3 carbon molecule may be broken down in absence of oxygen. This may be broken down, this 3 carbon pyruvate molecule may be broken down lack of oxygen, and this may be broken down in presence of excess of oxygen. So if this 3 carbon molecule is broken down in presence of oxygen to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide, energy is released. Now if this 3 carbon molecule is broken down in absence of oxygen, or we can say lack of oxygen, lactic acid formation takes place with the release of energy. And if this 3 carbon molecule is broken down in presence of excess of oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, and energy is released. Now students, see, in all this process, whether this breakdown of this 3 carbon molecule, pyruvate molecule, is taking place in absence of oxygen, lack of oxygen, or presence of oxygen, in all these steps energy is released. But the difference is, in absence of oxygen means there is one type of a cell, that's what the yeast cells. In yeast cells only this type of respiration occurs. That is, in absence of oxygen, 3 carbon molecule is broken down to produce ethanol, carbon dioxide, energy is released. The amount of energy released in this process is very less. Next students, see, 3 carbon molecule may be broken down lack of oxygen, insufficient supply of oxygen. So which takes place inside our muscle cells. In this process, lactic acid formation takes place and energy is released. So the amount of energy released in this process is also very, very less. So this is the reason when we run a long distance, our muscle starts cramp. So the energy released in this process being very less, we have to breathe faster so that the required amount of oxygen is sent to the cells for the release of energy. Now finally, suppose if this 3 carbon molecule is broken down in presence of oxygen, which takes place inside a mitochondria, carbon dioxide, water is released, and a lot of energy is released. Now this is the process where maximum amount of energy is released, student. So this is a brief flow chart which tries and explains What happens to the glucose inside our cells? Now, that glucose may be broken down in absence of oxygen, that may be broken down lack of oxygen, and that may be broken down in presence of oxygen. So, different product and different amount of energy is released. I hope, student, you understood what is this respiration process is. So, respiration is a one such biochemical process where the broken foods are utilized to produce the energy. So, with that, we end this lecture here, and next important topic we'll discuss in the next lecture. Thank you.